welcome to Tips Over Tea. This is season 2. I am so thrilled to have the opportunity to have great conversations with some amazing people, and I have the opportunity to hang out with you guys again, my guests. Make sure you have your tea, whether it be hot or cold, for the Tips Over Tea, and make sure you have your notebook so you can take plenty of notes. And if you're so inclined, bring a friend or two to join you. For now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hey everyone, welcome to Tips Over Tea Season 2. I am thrilled to welcome Tamara as our first guest of the season. This is going to be a great conversation. We had a fun conversation just before I hit record and just talking about a bunch of things, catching up. And one of the things that we started talking about that I was like, we need to make this, well, actually she was like, let's make this into the show, embodiment and disconnection. So first of all, please introduce yourself and then let's just hop right into it.
Yeah. Hi, Tamara Yakaboski. I'm super excited to be here and to be with you again, Nikki. Short story, I coach and have a consulting business. I call myself, or used to call myself, a recovering academic. I think I'm pretty close to being recovered, which is why I love this topic of embodiment and disconnection, because
Yes.
I see so much when I look back on my life of really being this disconnected head from a body and having no connection. And so much of my work now has this thread of embodiment. So when we think about our topic of resilience, uh,
Mhm.
the importance of embodiment as the foundation. Um,
Mhm.
and for so many of us, it's the reconnecting work on lots of different layers. So yeah,
I love that.
I'll stop there.
So,
I can keep talking.
so for those who are not familiar with the term embodiment in general, and I know there's different layers and nuances,
Mhm.
but as far as where you mostly focus your work, what do you mean by embodiment?
Yeah, it is. It's just like a really fancy word to say. I always think about it like, how do I walk my brain back into my body? Um, and as someone who was really socialized to sit at a desk in a computer 20 hours a day, near 7 days a week for decades, right?
Mhm.
It required a lot of the disconnection, right? A lot of not being embodied, disembodiment, so that
Yes.
I could just easily override. One of the most fascinating things that comes through all threads are the amount of predominantly women who tell me some version of having trained their body not to have to pee during the day, or they won't get up in a meeting or a workshop or whatever to go pee, right? So
Mhm.
this is
Mhm.
this disembodiment. So really, yeah, it's just practices to safely, bring our mind back into our body to start to notice things. We do this through a lot of yoga, breath work, sometimes exercise, sometimes movement, sometimes walking. Uh,
Mhm.
and so there's just a lot of different practices for that. But yeah, it's just like, come back.
Yeah, I love that you gave an example of that because that was going to be my next question. Is like, how would someone know if they are separated, so to speak, right? At least on the physical plane. And yes, not having to go to the bathroom. Like for me, I work in a secure environment. And so going to the bathroom requires getting up, bringing your credentials, going
Mm,
out of the whole building, then going to the bathroom, and then having to scan back in. It's not the whole building, but the
yeah.
office space. So it's just like, do I feel like getting up right now? Do I want to keep drinking water? I know I need it, but it's going to make me have to
Mhm.
go to the bath, like that type of thing. So I love that you use that as an example because it is very, very common for that. What would be another indicator of this embodiment that someone
Yeah.
may not recognize so clearly?
So I always think about the way, so I used to run quite a lot before I had a neck injury from
Mm,
chronic stress that actually kicked off my journey to
mhm,
realizing I was disembodied and actually learning how to come back home, right? Come back to my body.
mm, mhm,
Um, and at that time, I'm like, oh, I'm doing so good for my body, right? Like I'm eating well, I'm exercising, doing all the things. But what I see is when I would run, I'd have headphones on and I would actually like my best runs would
mhm,
be if I could zone out,
mm,
right? So if I could completely zone out from my body. And
mhm,
I used to think, oh, that's just me getting in the flow. Isn't that the ideal?
right.
And I see now, right? Like, actually, no, because I wasn't feeling anything, right? I wasn't
Mm,
connecting. I wasn't connecting to the pavement or to the trail or my environment, right? I was just very like disconnect, zone out so that I can keep going and push through it,
mhm.
which, so kind of lo and behold, no wonder one day I step off the sidewalk and I hear a pop. I'm like,
Mm.
oh, that's probably not good. It sounded like an internal pop. Um, And by the end of that week, I'm in urgent care getting, all the shots and MRIs and whatnot of my C6, 7, and a little bit of 5 had herniated.
Jesus.
And all of the authorities, there was no, right, there was no incident, there was no accident, there was no impact.
Mhm.
And so everything people pointed to was this chronic stress,
Yes.
this low hormones, all of the things that I myself wasn't. I mean, yeah, I knew I was stressed, but right, like I kind of thought that was like the normal. It is kind
Yeah.
of normal,
Right, right.
which is why we do the work we do, I think.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, so I think that's like another one of, I watch people how they take walks, how they go exercise, how they're out, how they
Mhm.
engage or not. And I think, that's another way, another um really prevalent example for me.
Oh, yeah, I can see that. One of the just doing, like, the positive intelligence training, if you've ever done PQ, he talks about, like, if you're doing a walking meditation, it's like, what does the pavement feel like on the ground as you're walking? I was at a networking event and someone was saying how they had trouble, like, being present. I was like, "Well, wiggle your toes sometimes
Mhm,
in your shoes." So I really love that example. One of the biggest things I love about that is, like, what you said, right? I'm doing right by me, I'm running, I'm eating right, and, like, you can literally tell yourself and fool yourself into thinking that you're doing all the right things, and if you don't real recognize that this connection is not serving you well,
mhm.
like you said, this is me just going with the flow, and I really, really appreciate that example because I can imagine there are people who are like, "Wait, what?" Or they can self-identify with that for
Yeah.
sure.
Well, and, like, so much of it, I work a lot with folks who I call, like, we are overers, right?
Mhm.
We are over-functioning, we're overworking, we're overcommitting, we're, over-worrying, right? Like, there are all these different ways, and part of that is, like, the demands of the society and workplace and families, right? This sort of go, go, go.
Mhm, mhm,
What I didn't understand until I really did my work, and then I work with so many other folks on this, is like, oh no, this is actually like it's here. It's right. It's in here. It's my mindset, my behaviors, and right, like it's all trapped in my body. So this like pathway back to embodiment is also
mhm,
like, what are my mindsets? What are the behaviors I'm doing?
mhm.
How am I perpetuating this overing for
Mm,
myself,
yeah.
as well as like what are the boundaries I need for like all the systemic
Yeah, yeah.
pieces too.
So when someone's coming to you for overing, I love that term. You have to coin it. um, it sounds like a book. Okay.
Mm,
Tangent.
yeah,
So yeah,
what you
with
doing?
that. Yes, absolutely. We could okay. We'll have a conversation on that. We'll get that squirrel later. Um,
Mhm.
where do you start them? Is it like an awareness, kind of like how we just discussed, like this is what sometimes embodiment will look like or can look like? Where do they start with you, and how do you know what path to direct them on, and
Mhm.
how does that work? I love it.
Yeah. So over the years of doing this work, I've actually developed kind of like a 6, not steps, right? Because I think we're
Mhm.
constantly kind of, I don't think of it linearly, right? Like I think
Yeah,
of it
yeah.
more cyclically. So we really start with understanding that this the first is reveal. So
Mhm.
revealing where we are disconnected, right? And we, it depends on the person and their goals. So often I work with professionals and leaders. So we're kind of coming, our entrance point often feels easier because it's this, what's my relationship to work?
Mhm.
And how am I burnout, rusted out, exhausted, um, grieving, right? Like the
Mhm.
work piece. So we kind of look at what the disconnect is there. And
Mhm.
as you know, right, like these are just layers of the same, right? They're layers connected. So then, it often gets into sort of personal, but also my work looks at our disconnects within community,
Sure.
right? Like our bodies are meant to be in community with
Mhm.
other bodies.
Mhm.
And for a whole lot of reasons that we don't have enough time to dive into, we have this isolation, right? And it's really been harmful.
Yes.
Um, and then right, there's our climate work, climate urgency and emergency, right? And that largely is from a disconnect to nature as
Mhm.
well, an embodied disconnect.
Mhm.
Right? We can theorize it till we're blue in the face, right? But it's really comes down to what is our body connection.
Mhm.
This is our path forward. So we really kind of look at what is the layer of disconnect that feels most intolerable, or
Mhm.
kind of like has bubbled up the most. And so we enter there. And then like there's lots of places to go from that. But
Sure.
um, that is sort of our first of really understanding that overing behavior. And I've got a lot of resources now on like helping people kind of identify what some of those behaviors look like, um, from the really tangible, like, oh, look at my schedule. Why do you have 3 things booked for the same time? Right? Like that is really common. So
Yeah.
if you do something really tangible, like someone's schedule,
Mhm.
all the way to over worrying. Like
Mhm.
after a conversation concludes, then you're still thinking and ruminating about it. And
Yeah.
often um, people who are overing tend to really like to get into rescuing mode as well. Right. So then we kind of start, you just like, whew,
Yes.
goes off.
You know what? What came to mind as you were saying that, when you're overing, you get into rescue mode. 2 things came to mind, actually. One, it's like a misdirection of saving, right? They
Mm,
really wanna be saved themselves, but so they're saving someone else kind of like unconsciously. "Let me help you because I need help," right?
yeah.
Um, and then just the psychological in general. Now, also, of course, helping someone helps kind of relieve stress too. Um, but I'm just curious, like the psychological aspect of that.
Hmm.
You're already doing too much and you're trying to do more.
Right.
It's like, what are you really trying to accomplish by doing that at that point? So,
Oh, yeah, and that's where, we talked earlier before the recording about like, oh,
yeah.
boundary work, right? It's
Uh-huh.
always like it always comes to boundaries.
It
In
does.
part because I help people understand when someone hasn't asked you to be rescued, and most of the time they're not,
Mhm.
that's actually out of consent, right? That wasn't a consensual,
Yep.
it was a, very boundary violation. Um, and so you're off doing these other things when what you actually, as to what you're saying, is what I hear of like, you actually need to look and say, like, what here is actually mine, right?
Yeah.
And I love that question of like, can we just pause, feel into
Mhm.
the body,
Mhm.
notice the felt sensations, the emotions, the stories, the
Mhm.
behavior you want to do, and then just kind of say, what here is mine?
Mhm.
What do I need to do?
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, so simple, right? Like,
It is simple, not easy,
yeah,
when it's been chronic, right?
yeah.
Um, so when that which leads me to another point, like, so when you are helping people define boundaries, like, how much
Mhm,
guilt are you having to weed through for someone learning how to say no, like,
mhm.
honor their own boundaries, and then also expecting other people to honor their boundaries? Like, how do you help them navigate that? Because I know just doing it
Yeah.
with clients that I work with, they're like, "But I can't." Yeah, you can. Let's start here. So I'd love to hear how you do that a little bit.
Oh, yeah. Whew, guilt and shame.
Mhm.
Um, so actually my clients helped kind of reformulate this because um we have with my one-on-one clients and also my workshops, we always kind of create a community gathering. And
Mhm.
so one day we were talking about this. We were actually talking about creativity work. And I'm like, well, you have to create the boundaries of your time, right? And your
Yeah.
energy so that you can then do the creativity work.
Yep.
Oh, I can't, it's like, it's so selfish, all of the things we know about boundaries. And then we got to this beautiful, like, reframing of like, it's actually self-full,
Yeah.
right? So can you approach your boundaries from this place of like, let me be full myself, right? Let me show up fully
Yeah.
myself, which actually then helps me be a better friend, helps me be a better colleague, a better parent, whatever the thing is, right? Because you're showing up fully.
Yep.
Um, so we sort of like there's so much attached to the word of like boundaries are selfish, period,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We almost have to reframe actually.
Yeah.
Boundaries are self-full,
Yeah.
right? And I believe it's Brene Brown who says like, right, boundaries teach or like show us how to be in relation or just showing us how to be in relationship with each other.
Mhm. I love that.
Well, you care so much. Wouldn't you want the person to be really clear in how to
Yeah.
have a relationship with you?
Absolutely.
Right? And that's where it's self-full, right?
Yeah.
Or actually, I did a post on my Instagram recently of like, it's actually selfless.
Yeah.
Because wouldn't I want to give you the like cliff notes to how to be my friend?
Yeah.
Then that's what a
Absolutely.
boundary is, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yep.
selfless.
It is. And to your point a moment ago, and then also here, the energy the overuse of energy for like without boundaries, you exert a lot of energy. And then what were we talking about right before boundaries? Because there was also the lack of consent, right? Like you're trying to
Mhm.
help people, and when you're helping someone who doesn't want to be helped, that's an overuse of your energy. Like we only have so much energy, and so being very mindful and respectful of your own energy and who gets it is very selfless because then like you said you could actually show up a lot more fully and heartful when you're interacting with people that you actually want to interact with.
Yeah, and like the difference, right, of like
Mhm.
when I'm helping someone who has asked for my help and it's consensual, I'm gonna feel good.
Mhm.
They're gonna hopefully feel good, right?
Mhm.
When I'm overing and I'm violating mine and their boundaries, I'm gonna feel resentful,
Yep.
drained, frustrated. And so
Exactly.
again, like knowing your energy requires that embodiment too, right? It requires
Mhm.
like, oh, why when I always talk to that person, I am so frustrated, or I'm like yawning, or whatever your manifestation is of that energy,
Yeah.
that's an amazing cue,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, that's why I've come to like the embodiment piece is the foundation
Yeah.
for all of our work, especially in a world that really perpetuates these disconnects
Mhm.
for a lot of reasons, you know? And so in my one of my signature programs is this workshop called Reclaim You.
Mhm.
Over the 9 weeks, we actually have practices every week to start that relationship with our body in ways that are accessible for someone who's like inexperienced, whatnot, as well as like someone who's like, I do not talk to my body. That is like a place where we don't go. But it's so important to develop practices, right? And
Yeah.
I use the word practice as well as soul work in this workshop series because that's what it is, right? We go
Mhm.
inward, we do the investigation with curiosity and compassion. We
Mhm.
take the practices of like, okay, what does it mean to like notice my toes are wiggling, right? And we
Mhm.
kind of build from there, right? And we kind of work with gently
Mhm.
um, the nudges with our brain so our brain doesn't shut down to the changes and to the discomfort, right? So
Yeah.
it's just like um scaffolded way of doing the work with support because you're right, it's not easy, but it can be done with ease when there's
Mhm.
a pathway, when you have community,
Mhm.
when it's facilitated, right?
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, so what are some of the biggest, like, at the end of that 9 weeks, some of the things that you celebrate the most with the people in that group? 'Cause I just would love someone, as they're watching this, one, to self-identify with some of the things we've been talking about, and then
Mhm.
self-identify with, "I wanna be there," so, because I would love for them to join you in that 9 weeks. So what are some of the things that you guys celebrate at the end of that?
Yeah. I share a couple specific stories on my website, um,
Okay.
in part because they're all powerful journeys, right? And but what I love about the two that I have right now is one is this celebration of going from, what she called the client's name is Stephanie of, being nicey nice, boundaried, right?
Nice.
So really showing the shift of like, I'm a caregiver, I care for people, this is who I am, right? It's so embedded in like our identity.
Mhm.
And you can care for people with boundaries. Actually, you can
Yeah.
care for them better, right?
Yes.
And so
Yes.
really making that shift of like um, in her workplace with her coworkers, really shifting from this frustration and feeling walked on
Yeah.
um, because it was so central to be nice. I'm like, we can be kind, right? So it was really this shift from nice to being
Mhm.
kind,
Got
boundaries.
it. Yes.
Um, and then this other client, Matt, he talks about learning how to listen to his body in his leadership decisions um, so that he showed up making decisions that were for the collective good
Mhm.
that didn't sacrifice him, right?
Mhm.
Like himself, his well being. And that was a really big shift for him um, to kind of be able to learn some practices, some really specific skills, which is what
Mhm.
we build over the 9 weeks. And it's not like a one size, I'm like, everybody must do this. Uh,
Right.
I'm like, here are the things that have really big impact. Here are the ways people have made them work. What do
Try
you
it.
want to do, right? Like, what's
Right.
one thing? Like, let's get one thing moving, right?
Mhm.
And then in the group, we create that momentum.
Mhm.
Um, and so I think for people who are looking for that like, okay, maybe embodiment's like a buzzword now, right? But you're like, I don't know what to do with it. Also, I don't want to do like 90 minutes of embodiment stuff. I just want like a little flavoring. I want to learn a few things.
Mhm.
And, I really want to shift out of these patterns, or I want to learn how to engage differently at work or with my colleagues or with my sister, or, whatever it is, right? Because
Mhm.
um, all of our relationships tend to have some common patterns to them.
Yes, yes. Yep, and including the relationship with ourselves.
Yeah, that absolutely. I mean, that's why it's called Reclaim You.
Yeah.
It may sound kind of cheesy, but no, it's really like it's time to come home to you, right?
Yeah.
And like take this up. The world needs us to be bigger and bolder and like grounded, but like
Mhm.
big,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. Yes, yes. I love that, and I imagine, like, the people who work for the people you've worked with are, like, really appreciative that they've gone through, right? Because I know, like, it can be very, um when you don't know what to expect from someone, just on the other side, right? The person who's not setting the boundaries and you're, like, always confused, like, I don't know what's going to upset them, I don't know what's going to and it does create turmoil or confusion in a relationship, and, like, eggshells ends up being the flooring, and, like, you just
Yes.
never know how to respond or how the person's gonna react, you don't know what,
Mm.
So, I, um I appreciate the way, you're approaching that, so that we can get a better understanding. I feel like we gotta figure out another word for instead of the word boundaries, even though I will appreciate that you're, like, redefining it. Something will come up, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I often kind of phrase it to folks of like embodied boundaries because
Mhm.
just saying no all the time isn't actually probably isn't going to resonate for you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I think when we learn what it feels like to establish embodied boundaries, we're doing things with the care of others in mind as well,
Yeah.
right? And this is the real shift of like, I think when boundaries aren't embodied and it's just a no, I think this is some of where we get like this selfishness
Yeah. Yep.
versus like, no, actually, like these are my values, right? And I communicated these and I was clear and I was consistent and I was kind
Mhm. Mhm.
and I have to now say no, right?
Yeah.
Like it because embodied boundaries have that honest critical communication.
Yeah.
They're not the so and so violated my boundary. Well, did they know? No, they should have just known. Right? Like it's not that, right? That can be
Right.
harmful.
Yeah. Yep.
Uh, but yeah, I don't I say I call them embodied boundaries. And yeah, you're right. Like it's still like kind of when we're starting the work,
Yeah, absolutely.
you kind of be like, "Ooh, no."
Yeah. No, but I love that concept, um, the connection with the body with the response to whatever, right? It's not just it's very intentional in the
Mhm,
way and you connected it with their values. Because a lot
mhm,
of times, I don't know that people really take a step back and think about that because they do things out of obligation, right?
mhm,
And
so much.
so right? And I'm like, you're not obligated to anyone, like, no matter how much they've helped you, right? There's nothing in any book that says, "Because they've helped you this much, you are obligated." If you're
Yep.
doing it because you feel the desire, the move, you feel moved to do something, like, it's so, that's always an interesting conversation. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, that's the shoulds live here and the doing because you want, because it's value aligned, because it's the right like, genuinely the right thing.
Yeah.
It's a communal thing,
Mhm.
um, because boundaries aren't just, like, the individual, right? It's a communal.
Yeah.
Um, very much like we are a communal species. We
Mhm.
need, right? We need to kind of come back to that. Um, and we can only do that with, as you said, the intentional pause,
Mhm. Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And that's something I've had to learn. Um, and that's ultimately what I feel like my work is like
Mhm.
helping people relearn to be human together, to live with intention and purpose and values, regardless of what you're doing.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. I love it. What a beautiful conversation and how quickly 30 minutes have gone by.
I know.
I love it. That is a good sign. We have
Yeah,
so many more episodes that we're gonna have to record together. So much to talk about.
so much to talk about. Yeah, can't wait.
Yeah, same here. Tamara, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you to whomever tuned in. I will have, or there is in the description, the class that the workshop that starts next week, right? The
Yep,
16th.
February 16th.
So there will be a link for you to click if you're interested in joining her. It sounds like an amazing workshop. I'm gonna have to do it one day.
Yeah,
Um, and of course, her contact information is in the description as well. So be sure to reach out to Tamara. She's, as you can see, an amazing young lady, and she's doing good work in the world. And I'm thrilled to have had this conversation with you and spend this time with you. So thank you for joining us today.
thanks so much, Nikki, and everybody watching. Look forward to hearing.
Absolutely, and you're welcome. Ciao for now. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Hope you enjoyed the show and got a lot of good information. Be sure to like, subscribe, tap the bell so you know when we air again. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Enjoy the rest of your week.